back to another Iceman series segment. In this video here, I want to take you to the Dark Continent with me on a hunt that I was at in 2016. And that was definitely on my to-do list, but I had no idea I would do it that quick. I thought I would be trying to do it in 2020 or 2019. But anyway, I kind of fell into that hunt. A guy that I met at one of the expos asked me did I wanted to go to Africa to hunt, and I was like, oh yeah, man. So quite naturally, you got to get permission from the wife, and she said, yeah, go ahead. So I was on the next plane smoking. So anyway, got to Africa and got set up. I did not know what to expect because I didn't really look at everything that this lodge had to offer. I looked at a little bit of it, but got there. They had great lodges. I had heating and air in my room, which was great. And I looked under the bed for king cobras. I was looking for pythons. I was looking for everything under my bed before I went to sleep to make sure I wasn't going to get tore up or bit. I was looking for scorpions. I mean, I was looking for everything. I was even looking for pythons when I went from, and leopards and things, when I was going from my bungalow to the lodge. I'm talking about at night because they hunt at night. So, you know, I had to get rid of that phobia. It's kind of funny, but in a sense it's not, because if you get grabbed by a lion and get drugged into the brush, you got a problem. So anyway, it was great. So getting to my first hunt, we got set up in this concrete blind and next to a water hole. So I'm sitting at this water hole with the pH and the tracker, and we just sitting there whispering, talking. And he explained to me what we would probably see. He said we would probably see Cape buffalo, eland, wildebeest, warthogs, and giraffe. And we seen all of them. And I was like, wow. And when I saw the giraffe, he was like 8 yards. He came in 8 yards from the blind drinking water. And he was also in a big old acacia tree to our left. And he was just reaching up and just taking these branches and just cracking them. He'd take his neck and crack these branches and pull them down so he could eat the leaves off the top of those big old acacia trees. And I was like, what? I think they were acacia trees. I know they had acacia bushes, but anyway, there was these big trees, and they was trying to get to the leaves. And I mean, he was just taking branches this big around and just popping them and bringing them down and eating them. I was like, good Lord. So I told him I'm so glad that we were in a concrete blind, because if he decided to kick our blind, he would hurt himself. Because if we had a pop-up blind like we do back home, I told him, he would kick us like a field goal, a football through a field goal on a football field, if we had just regular old pop-up blind like we do for turkey hunting. So we sat there and watched him eat those leaves, and we just sat there. We seen some monkeys come through, and also we seen big old eland. I mean, they just came through, and it's kind of cool how they walk. When they walk, their hooves click together. Just hear little clicks when they coming, and they are huge. And I really had that on my list for a later date, because I had already put on my list on what I was going to take that particular trip, because I did not know what to expect. And he told me, he said, the PH told me, he said, I have never had anybody come here for the first time with a bow. Everybody that goes there for the first time comes there with a gun. And I was like, well, I'm a bow hunter, so let's see what's going to happen. So, and he also said I was the first black hunter they ever had. So that was interesting. So anyway, let me take y'all on my first hunt. First hunt, we got set up, like I said, in that blind. And we had eland come in. We had that big giraffe come in. And we also had a Nyala come in. That's the in the family of the antelope, next to the kudu. And he was beautiful. He was like 8 yards from me. Perfect broadside shot. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And some of you hunters know what I'm talking about. You got that perfect broadside shot, 8 yards. And you really want to say, you know what, let me grab my bow and shoot. But he wasn't on my list. So I'll get to that later. So we sat there, and we saw the wildebeest that I was after, it was a bull, but I mean, he stayed back with the cows and the young bulls. He stayed back in the brush. Maybe he smelled us. I don't know what it was, but he... I don't know what that's all about. Sound like they missed a gear. I don't know. Anyway, so we watched this wildebeest, and I've never seen a wildebeest in real life. I've always seen them on TV, you know, Serengeti, all that. So I'm looking like, gosh, and they were just grunting. He was back there grunting, and I'm thinking they just remind me of a whitetail because they just smelling, you know, they're checking the wind and all that. I'm like, wow, that was incredible. So he stayed back at least 80 yards and never came in. So we waiting and waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden, I think it's like 5 o'clock in Africa, so, and it's still daylight, and it gets darker later there for some reason. So all of a sudden, the tracker poked me on my shoulder and pointed, and he said it was a blessed buck coming, and he was just walking like, to me, a blessed buck reminds me of this old donkey with horns. That's what it reminded me of. He just was coming in like, you know, just coming in like it was nothing. So I'm looking. I grab my bow real slow because still I'm thinking predator mode. So I grabbed my bow and picked it up, and I mean, I'm in a really bad, awkward spot to shoot because right next to me, I'm jammed up against the blind. The blind is, it's about the size of 2 pop-up blinds, 2 standard pop-up blinds for 2 men. So it's enough for 4 guys to sit in, a little bit cramped, but 3 guys were decent with all the equipment and everything. So anyway, I grabbed a bow and I'm up against the blind. Got my bow in my hand and I'm ready to pull back. And they was feeding the animals alfalfa, bales of alfalfa, and they were just tearing it up. And the reason why they was doing that is because they had a drought there. And just about everything around the natural foliage was brown. It just was dead because it was so hot. They didn't have that much rain. So they was feeding the animals alfalfa, and they was just coming in tearing it up. So he went to this little spot, I want to say 22, 25 yards of alfalfa, and I grabbed the bow and I started to draw back, and I think it was a hook up where I had, yeah, it was the hook where I actually hung my bow up. I picked my bow up a little bit and I hit the hook, the click, and he looked up in our direction, and I was like, oh man, I blew it. And he just looked there for like, God, it seemed like forever. So he finally put his head back down. I was able to get the bow back. I hit the release, gut shot. And I was like, oh man, because what happened, I was shooting at a bad position, and which is I never should have shot at all. I should have waited. I should have kind of went to the right a little bit to get a better position, because I mean, I was all uncomfortable and my form was messed up, and I don't know what it was. Although I was a little bit intimidated, I'm gonna be honest with you, because the anatomy of the animal, I mean the internal anatomy of Africa animals, their vitals and everything is way forward and it's different. And so that's what kind of had me a little bit intimidated, because I'm so used to shooting whitetail and it's a little bit different. But the tracker, he teased me, he picked up, it was like alfalfa, and he picked it up off the ground, and he called it blood, but he was picking with me, and I was like, oh man, I got to redeem myself. So we tracked him, gosh, 200 yards and finally ended up getting him. So, but that was my lesson learned, and that was for me to be able to get over my fear or my intimidation of my first harvest in Africa with a bow. So my second hunt, we moved to another location on the property, and that seemed like 35-minute ride inside the park, and it was a long way. So we went over there to this particular spot and got set up, and it was a beautiful Another beautiful concrete blind. We was down like about 1.5 feet, 2 feet down in the ground. So we got set up in there, and I'm looking around and looking outside a little bit just to kind of get the feel of the area. And I mean, they had tracks everywhere, and it was dry. It was like sand. And then across from the where the blind, out in front of the blind was a trough. It was a big old concrete trough sticking up. It was just sitting on the ground, probably about, I want to say, 8 by 20 feet with water in it. And it looked like it's for cows, but it was for everything that was living out there. So we got set up, and I'm talking to the tracker, which his name is Andres. Man, that guy was like spot on when it comes to finding animals. So anyway, I'm sitting there and have my bow hanging up, and he pointed, and I was like, "You see him?" Because the PH told me that it was a big ram in that area, and it was a smaller ram and probably like 4 or 5 ewes that was he was walking with. So I'm sitting there, and it's still they were off to a right in a patch of thicket, because, and I'm thinking whitetail. They standing over there because they wanted to come and get some water, but they're standing over there checking the wind, and all of a sudden I started getting buck fever. Well, I want to call ram fever, Impala ram fever, because I'm thinking, oh man, they get ready to come. I'm thinking, okay, I got to get over that initial shock. At least I thought I did when I harvested my blessed buck, and I still wasn't over that fever. So I'm thinking, or should I say, I wasn't over that initial shock. At least I thought, but that's what they call it hunting. You're just gonna get that adrenaline. So he still was over there, and I'm like, "You see him?" He's like, "Yeah." "What is he doing?" "Nothing." I was like, "Oh man." So I'm sitting there, and I'm antsy because I want him to come, right? So I think it was about 20 minutes later, all of a sudden, he's like, "They're coming." Then the ewes started coming first, just like whitetail. The ewes walked past me. I mean, they were like 10 yards out in front of the blind, walking right past us. 1 ewe, 2nd ewe, the 3rd, 4th, young ram. Here come big boy behind her. I was like, man, I mean, he had some nice horns. Check him out. He had some nice horns. So he went over to the trough, and he got on the back side of the trough. And I'm thinking, I don't have a major shot. I don't have a great shot, because I'm probably about this much from the bottom of his chest towards the center of his chest. From the bottom to about the center was covered up by the trough, because the trough was off the ground. So it was about this much area of the where I could shoot, because this was the top of his back, and this was like the middle of his body. So I had to aim. I drew back once he put his head down. I wanted him to put his head down, and the Impala really was the only animal in Africa that really intimidated me, because I was looking at a lot of videos on YouTube before I went, and I hear guys, when they hit the release, I mean, they duck the arrow because they're so quick. The Impala's quicker than a whitetail. If you guys never been to Africa before, they are quicker than a whitetail. It's like 2 times, 3 times as fast as a whitetail when it comes to reaction time. And I was like, man. So my Halon 6, man, that thing was quiet too. It was real quiet, because when I shot the blessed buck, he never even flinched or nothing, because I call him like a donkey with horns. So anyway, I'm like, oh man, and I'm planning in my head, what are you gonna do? Because it was a good shot, but dealing with the angle, he was behind that trough hiding some of his vitals. So I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to put that pin about a 1/2 inch above that trough, and if he ducked, I still can get double long. hopefully, or I'm gonna miss him because I only got the top half of his body that's gonna react to the shot. I don't have the whole body. I don't have the whole area from the bottom of the chest to the top to aim just a little low. So if he duck, I still got. But I'm gonna try. So I'm drawing back. Got the bow back, and I got that pin about a ½ inch higher than the trough. And I look, and I got that pin right there, right where his vitals is, about a half. Okay, if I skip off that trough, if I shoot a little low, it's gonna skip off that trough and hopefully still hit him. So about a ½ inch higher than that trough, I hit the release. That arrow went exactly where I put the pin. It hit mid body. As soon as that arrow got just at him, he was getting ready to duck, but it was too late. Double lung, he ran off. The arrow blew through him and went another 60, 70 yards. And the tracker went out and got the arrow. So he ran off, and we waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes, got out of the blind, and followed the trail over to him. And we saw the ewes run from the area where they all went at first, and then the young ran over there, behind the ewes, but the big boar never came out. So we was like, we knew something was good. So we went over to him. He was curled up underneath the acacia bush, done. So I was like, yes. So really, that first impala got my confidence up. He really got my confidence up. So let me take you on my next hunt. So we went over to another location. Gosh, that was about an hour and a half away. So we got into this particular spot and check out the blind. It's really cool. It's really cool. So we got there and we saw it was a young wildebeest bull. Young bull came in. I'm thinking I'm gonna shoot him, and he's like, no, he's too small. I'm like, you too small? I'm thinking, oh man, he's big to me. So, but he was a young bull. But I thought his bosses were big because you know they had bosses like Cape Buffalo, but it's a different kind. But he looked big to me. But he's like, no, he's too young. I was like, what? So I said, okay. So I'm sitting there watching them slobbering, you know, mouth watering, thinking, oh man, I want to get my bow. So I'm sitting there and had all these guinea fowl coming in, and they just making all kinds of noise and everything. And so I'm like, okay. So finally, a warthog came in. I mean, big old tusk, but I found out she was a female, and she was starving to death because of everything was dead over there. Everything was dying, and she was just starving from malnutrition. And I felt bad for her. And I told him, I said, you know what? I'd rather take her and just let her. I'd rather just take her out of her miseries because she's gonna die of starvation because she's already starving. I mean, you've seen her. Check her out. You're seeing a pelvis bone, a rib cage, and everything. I was like, man, she was a walking skeleton. So we went on and took her out, and perfect shot. She ran about 30 yards, and just drew back, hit the release. Like I said, she ran about 30 yards, and it was over. And the only reason why I guess I'm not excited about that hunt there is because I felt sorry for her. She was gonna die of starvation anyway. But that was a really bad thing to see, that the animal that weak and just looking for something to eat, and the only thing they could really eat is what they put out there for them, because everything else was just dead from the drought. But it was something to see. So okay, take it to my next hunt. We went back to where I got my blessed buck and sat up and wait for Mr. Man, the wildebeest, because I really want this wildebeest. He was actually a gold. He was actually a hybrid, a blue and a gold wildebeest, and I did not know he was an $11,000 animal. until after I shot him. So, but I've realized that they was just playing with me with the price they had already gave me, but they was trying to get him out of there because they didn't want another hybrid, or should I say they didn't want a hybrid breeding the cows. So they either wanted a blue or gold. They didn't want a hybrid doing that. So we got set up on him, and he came in closer this time. First time he was like 80, 85 yards. Second time he was like 60 yards. And I'm thinking, okay. He finally came into the trough, but it was a really bad position because I had a really nice broadside shot. He was about 50 yards. But next to him were the eland. So I'm thinking, okay, if I draw this bow back and hit the release, I can hit my cam on the blind. The arrow can do something strange when I hit the release, and I can miss him and hit the kudu. I'm sorry, I can miss him and hit the eland. If I had a shot that eland, then I would have to buy her. I would have to pay for her. So I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna shoot. So on to the next location. We went back to where I harvested the warthog. Went back there and seen another impala. But I only had one impala on my list. So I'm looking at this impala. I mean, he's not as tall and wide as my first impala, but he's thick. Check him out. So he came in. This impala came in, and I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at him. So I'm looking at him, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and harvest another one. Cobwebs. So I'm gonna go ahead and harvest another one. So I told the PH, because he filmed a lot of my hunts. Just the shot, not the hunt, but just the shot. So I said, go ahead and I said, I'm gonna go ahead and take him. So he said, okay. So it was a tree there, and I got my bow, and he was walking from right to left, and it was a tree in the way. So I'm thinking, okay, if he get in between that tree, I done already picked my spot, because bow hunters, you know, you guys know, you got your shooting lane. You got to find your shooting lane before you shoot. Then you can kind of get mixed up and messed up and hit trees and sticks and stumps and no-see-ums like vines and things like that. So you should always make sure you got your shooting lane before you draw your bow. So I found my shooting lane. I said, okay, he get between that acacia bush and that tree. I mean, it was about this much of an opening. Might have been about like that. This much of an opening between the tree and the bush, and everything else was just thick. So I said, okay, if he stopped right there, I'm gonna put it right on his shoulder. So I drew back, and he stopped. I drew back. So I drew back, and he stopped. I hit the release, square on his shoulder. He kicked up and ran. I was like, uh-oh, shoulder shot. I got spider webs all over my camera. So maybe they like my camera. So anyway, he ran off. So we waited 10 minutes, 15 minutes, got out of the blind, tracked him, and had to take him out again because I hit bone. I went straight through his bone, but the arrow only penetrated about 6 inches. So I think I got one long, or it went up, or it did something. But anyway, and he was gonna expire, but we just didn't want him to sit there and suffer, so we went on and dispatched him. And that was an awesome hunt. He went about 80 yards. So okay, on to the next hunt. We went back to the blind where we seen the draft and where I got my blessed buck on this particular hunt. So we sat in the blind. And I really, this particular time, I wanted that kudu or the Nyala. But to be honest with you, I really wanted the Nyala over the kudu. I just wanted that animal. I wanted that animal bad. So we got back there because that Nyala would come in every day around the same time. So I was trying to eat my lunch early so we can get out there early and get set up and wait on him. So I think the tracker, the PH, he had to do something in town. And we got there a little late. And as soon as we got there, he was at the water hole. And I was so hurt because Because I'm thinking, oh yeah, he's gonna come back. That's what I'm thinking. So he skirted off into the brush, and we got set up. He never came back. And I told him, I said, well, and we've been looking at a kudu, a 52-inch kudu. Check him out. We've been looking at that kudu, and we've been also looking at the Nyala. And I told him, I said, well, if the kudu come in first, then I'll go ahead and take the kudu. But I was hoping the Nyala would come back. So guess what? Here come the kudu, just walking in. I was like, oh man. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't disappointed for the most part, but just a little bit I was disappointed because I wanted that Nyala. I should have held out, but I didn't. So the kudu came in, and it wasn't a hard quarter. He was kind of quartering towards me. So I'm watching him. So he walking out of the Acadia thicket, and it's amazing how big they are when you're looking at them. And it's like a elk. So I'm looking at him, and you know, heartbeat. So I drew my bow back, anchored in, hit the release, and you know, the arrow, it did its thing. I mean, disappeared through his chest, and he kicked up and ran. And then he went back in the thicket, and the tracker, he was pointing to him, and he's like, there he is. And I'm thinking, where? You know, he's like, I'm like, where? And I'm looking. I mean, I don't think I had binoculars. No, they did have binoculars. I'm looking through I'm glassing. I still don't see him. He's pointing. He's like, then he moved me over a little bit further, and I still didn't see him, but I had to really look. It's amazing how they can blend in with green, and they were like tan and white patches on their face. And he was standing there, motionlessly, just not even moving, just standing there. And I'm thinking, man, at least I thought I had a decent pass through. But what I did, I clipped, I think I got the backside of his lung, one lung, and I missed the other lung, got one lung, because he was just standing there. He was standing there, but he was gonna expire because we waited 15 minutes before we started inching our way towards him. And as soon as we got around there, he was laying down. So I just went on, and I already had my arrow on. I just went on and drew back and put it behind his shoulder and shot. And he bucked up and just reared forward, and boom! You should have heard that thump hit the ground. And so he hit the ground. I mean, he was 12 yards from me when I shot. But he would have ended up leaving. But like I said, it's always good to get a humane harvest. You don't want animals to suffer. So going on to my next hunt. Okay, we already been through the blessed buck, the impala. We've been through the warthog, the other impala, and we went through the kudu. And now let's go with the one that really got on all of my nerves. I mean, he really got inside my head, which is the wildebeest. Okay, we got set up back where I first shot the blessed buck. Got set up over there again. So we set up in the blind. They put the guys, the feeders, should I say, they came out and put the alfalfa, the bales of alfalfa all out. So I see, the trackers see the bull and the cows and the young bull off of the distance. They were coming. So I'm thinking, okay, this has got to be my day. Got to be my day, because look, I got one more day to hunt after this, and then I got to get on the plane. So I'm sitting in the blind, and I'm actually doing a hunt in my head on how it's gonna go. That's how bad I wanted this wildebeest, because we did everything possible to get this wildebeest, but he would not come in. So he came in closer. He got about 50 yards and stopped. And then some gemsbuck came in to eat. And I guess the wildebeest didn't like the situation, so they turned around and went the opposite direction. I'm thinking, oh man, we blew it. So we just left because we didn't want to stay there too much longer because we were sweating, it was hot. So we just left. So we decided to go to the location where we seen the baboons, and where I actually got my my first Impala. So I was like, you know what, I ain't got nothing to lose. This is the last day, so whatever's gonna be is gonna be. So we got in the blind, and the feeders, the guys that come with the tractor and the alfalfa, he was just putting it out. And I'm looking out the window because the blind had like 3 different shooting windows, and then you have your door to come in. And I'm looking, I'm like, okay, he's putting the alfalfa out, but it's not in front of any of the windows. So I told the PH in the track, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna move the alfalfa in front of the windows like 15, 20, 25 yards, 13, 15, whatever. And he's like, okay, fine, because they would have been eating in between windows, and I can't do a thing about it. So I went on and got out. Me and the tracker got out, and we decided to just put the alfalfa in strategic places to possibly get a shot. So it was a bale of it, looked like the size of a basketball, and I just picked it up and I put it in front of the middle window, about, I guess, 13 yards away from me. And I'm thinking, maybe he'll go to that one. I don't know, maybe. So we put some over here and we put some over there. And I don't know why I was focused on this basketball of alfalfa, but I'm just focused on this one particular spot. So we sitting there talking, whispering, and we whispering, and we going over on how I wanted to go down. And I told Andres, the tracker, I said, okay, if he comes in, I want you to open the blind after I draw. And after I draw, I'm ready to shoot. So we just kind of rehearsed it. He's like, okay. And he just tapped me on my leg. And it's like, I was like, oh man, so, you know, heart beating. And I had wildebeest fever. Because we done sat up on him 4 different times. And he just would elude us every time. So he came in. You hear him coming and grunting. You hear him grunting. And I'm like, oh man. He went right to the little basketball-sized alfalfa that I put out with my bare hands. I thought you have to have gloves because, like deer, you know, if you put out something, you don't want to have your scent on it. I put it out with my bare hands, just put it there. He went right to it, and I'm thinking, when he opened that blind up, I was like, gosh, that thing is big, because I mean, 13 yards, it kind of like a miniature moose to me. As soon as I drew my bow back, I said, okay. He opened them blinds, and I put the pin. It was an easy shot for me because 13 yards is nothing. How can you miss an animal that big at 13 yards? So I'm already looking through the peep sight, and I put it right there in the crease and hit the release. He kicked up and ran. And I couldn't see where he was going because I couldn't see, he went that way in between the windows. So I really couldn't look around to see, or look that way and see, because he was in between the windows. And the PH told me he was just zigzagging back and forth. So he went out to like 98 yards and just tumbled over top of Acacia bush. And I was like, boom, that was it. And that was the last evening of my hunt. And I was headed back to the airport that morning, the next morning. And I was like, man, I have never been that stressed out before. Even the cook back at camp, she knew there was something wrong with me because I wasn't talking to nobody. She's like, I was wondering what was wrong with you. I told her, I said, I just let that wildebeest get in my head, and I had to try to figure out something. But that wraps up my Africa hunt. Like I said, it was an awesome experience for me to go out there and experience actually where I came from, and the food and the people. And it was the most important part of the whole entire hunt. I was able to feed villages. That was the most important part of my hunt. I was able to bless somebody with some food that needed some food to eat, because there's a lot of people over there are real poor. They don't have anything, and that just did my heart good. But only thing I regret doing is meeting the village chiefs. I wanted to do that, but I didn't get a chance to do that. So maybe one day I can go back and meet the village chiefs and sit down and talk to them and just have a nice time and then go from there. But like I said, if you get a chance to go to Africa to bow hunt or gun hunt or whatever you do, I guarantee you, you won't be the same. It is something special to go over there and see all those big, huge, beautiful animals that definitely can intimidate you, eat you, whatever, run you down, whatever, chase you away. I don't know, but just to go over there and just sit there and watch them, it's breathtaking. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little clip. Like I said, I've been talking a lot, and I try not to bore nobody when I do videos, but I just try to take them on a journey with me, and hopefully they stick to stay, and just enjoy what I've been saying to them. But anyway, I'm gonna leave this with you. If you don't know Christ as your Lord and Savior, I just encourage you to get to know Him, because like I said, He came into my life years ago, and He also sent my wife in my life back in 1988. We got married in 1990. We dated for 2 years, and she symbolizes Christ. My wife does. She symbolizes what a Christian ought to be. And she reminded me of my grandmother, because my grandmother was the one who did her wedding. She the one who married my wife and I back in 1990. And my mom was a lady as well. She was a great woman, and she was a lady. And my wife, she's a lady. And that's what I love about my wife. She's not one of those good time girls. You got some wives that like to go out and party and drink and act crazy, but my wife, she don't drink, she don't smoke. I don't smoke or drink. That's one great thing we have in common. We love the elderly. My wife and I, we love the elderly as well. And like I said, she's I thought she was an angel, although I know she's not one, but she just reminds me of an angel. And she's just really cool to be who she is, because no matter what goes down, she may get upset about some things because she's human, but no matter what goes down, she always shows that she's a Christian. And she's been doing it ever since I've been dating her. And our first date, we went to church. She took me to church on her first date, because I got out of church after I turned like 16, because I went to church all the time. And then when I met her, I went back to church. She drew me back to church, so I'm glad she did that. But anyway, Christ is the only one to keep you. And it doesn't have to be a pandemic. It could just be just normal everyday thing. But in this pandemic, you have to have Christ, because the enemy will lead and guide you, as they say, down a rabbit hole. And that's exactly what he's been doing to a lot of people. And I know some of the media is fake, but some of it's not fake. Some of it is real, because all you got to do is go outside and go to the store a couple of times. Sometimes you'll see somebody to do something crazy, and he's like, yeah, I see it. Because God will never leave you nor forsake you. He will always provide for you. I'm going to tell you, He's been providing for my wife and I ever since we've been married. And it seemed to be getting better and better, because once you learn the secret to God, you will never be without. And that's faith. Because the Bible says it's impossible to please Him without faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. And it took me 30-some years to trust God totally when it comes to me. And when I finally got it, I want to say 3 years ago, When I finally got it, I said, God, I'm going to trust you totally with this. You have to trust him with your whole heart. Don't just say it in don't say it in your mind and just don't, and you know, and he knows you don't believe it. But if you say it with your whole heart, and it'll come to pass that quick, because he knows when you trust him and he knows when you don't. But it feels so good when you say it and you mean it in your heart. You mean that you trust God, and he comes through for you just like that, and you be like, wow. And then the next time around it becomes easier, because the first time was a test, your first encounter with trust, and your second time was easier, then your third time will get easier, and then so on. But it's a great feeling now that I can actually say, Lord, I'm going to put this in your hand. I'm going to trust you with this, and walk away. And it'll come to pass so quick, you'll be like, thank you. It's amazing on what God will do with you. But you have to ask him to clean you up, keep you clean, and also watch the company that you keep too, because there are some people, they say they're in your corner, but sometimes the enemy sends you friends too. So-called friends. The enemy will. So you have to be careful about that. And then when you become a Christian, I'm talking about a true Christian, your circle of friends will shrink, and sometimes down to 1 or 2 people. But that's for your good. And then once God gets you to the place where he wants you to be, then you can draw people to you, because they'll see Christ in you, and you can help them get saved. I mean, I could talk about a couple of friends that I've been talking to, and I helped them. I was just giving them words, and they told me that I helped draw them to Christ, and I was like, wow. And I wasn't even trying. It's just that if it's in you, it's gonna come out when it needs to. But that was a blessing to be able for somebody to tell me I helped draw them to Christ. That was really a blessing, and it did my heart good, and it also helped me keep going to help draw somebody else to Christ. And you don't have to pull the Bible open and read from Genesis to Revelation to that particular person. You can just every now and then throw them a nugget, give them a word of wisdom, say something godly, say something about the scripture, say something every now and then. And it's like you're feeding them like an IV effect, where it's just trickling in them. That's how I put it. And that seed, it's like you're planting a seed, and it'll grow. And sometimes it takes somebody else to come and water that seed, so that seed to grow and that particular person to get saved. But just read Romans 10:9 and confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. But before you do all of that, make sure you repent. Get down on your knees and repent and apologize to God about your shortcoming, and he'll clean you up. But I tell you, it's nothing like being with Christ, living for Christ, being on the good side of the, as I said, good side of the track and bad side. But it's nothing like being in Christ. It's nothing like being in Christ. Because if in this pandemic, if you're not walking with God, you're walking with the enemy. And I don't get how people can walk with the enemy in these times, because those people don't have no food, children are starving, and it's supposed to be the richest country in the world. And it's almost like a poverty country now, where you got kids that don't even have anything to eat, and that's sad. But people dying from cancer, they dying from high blood pressure, dying from heart disease, just different things, AIDS, and I guess some of them are dying from this pandemic, but I know a lot of them are dying from, a lot of people are dying from stress, and some people are dying from suicide. So, but they ain't saying that. But anyway, I'm gonna conclude this video here, and this concludes this video. I want to thank everybody for watching, and please subscribe to my video if you like my channel. God bless. Take care. Iceman signing out.